Well, I can tell this day is going to be different. You're just in a different mood today, and Ken Boggs is already eating candy. And he gave me a piece, so if I get bored, I'm going to eat this too, okay? And I'm doing this countdown to Christmas. It's 2 weeks minus 1 day. And as I said last week, for some that's very, very exciting, and for others of us it's a bit overwhelming. But it's a very, very special time of the year. Maybe that's why we're seeming in a little different mood today, or maybe it's the wind. I'm not sure what it is, but Christmas is, I don't know if I'm right. Maybe it is the most special of all of our holidays in a given calendar year. And it's a time when we think of family. It's a time when we think of loved ones. In fact, we think of loved ones so strongly that we give gifts to loved ones, and sometimes we give gifts to complete strangers because we're in this different kind of mood. So I want you to think for a moment this morning about what I am calling in this lesson the ultimate gift. And here's how I want to begin. If you could have anything you wanted, if you could have what I'm calling the ultimate gift, approximately 2 weeks from today, what would you choose? What would be the most special of all gifts? I am convinced that there are several who would say, my greatest gift would be my health, if I could just have my health back. And we have mentioned several people who really would like their health. And I've told you, at least on a Wednesday night, about my friend who is in Cancun, Mexico, in a special cancer treatment center right now. I suspect that he would say, I'd like to have my health. Someone else might say, well, the ultimate gift would be the healing of a relationship in my life that's been broken for a long time. And yes, I know there are others that say, well, it'd be a large amount of money, or it'd be a different house, or it'd be a different vehicle. And for a child, it might be, I'd like to have a new bicycle. I stopped by Eddie Brown's car dealership this week and looked inside of one of those bays, and he had 60 or so brand new bicycles. And he is partnering with a church here in town, and he's going to give those to underprivileged children and families who need help. And some little children are going to wake up and say, wow, what a gift. It's the ultimate gift. What do you think is the ultimate gift? And our lesson this morning is all about that, and you're probably ready for it. For the last 2 weeks, the lessons have been difficult. Do you recognize that? They've been really difficult. Because the last 2 weeks we've been talking about sin. And we saw 2 weeks ago that list at the end of Romans chapter 1, where Paul just blatantly puts it out there in front of us. And he talks about things like idolatry, and he talked about sexual depravity, and he talked about deceit and murder and slander and disobedience to parents. And probably we're all sitting there thinking, I'm in that list once or twice or 3 times. And then we continued last week and looked at what Paul said in Romans chapter 2, and he was talking about religious snobbery and this attitude that sometimes we get in religion, how we judge other people when at the same time we're doing something that's also called sin, and maybe even doing the same thing. And all those lessons were uncomfortable. Today shouldn't be uncomfortable. And I have better news than that. It should be shorter. I mean, 2 weeks ago I looked at the clock and thought, this went just a little bit too long. I like to do them short. And last week I thought, man, maybe it's just a little bit too long. I don't know where today will end up, but I hope short, okay? Ultimate gift. Paul's going to continue writing in Romans chapter 3 and verse 9. We have to point out verse 9 and the verses that follow. Burke will have them on the screen. It'll sound like I'm back to my old self for the last 2 weeks, but I'm really not. But Paul begins by saying, what shall we conclude from all this? And what he's going to conclude is that we made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are all under the power of sin. Now, when he says in his day and time, Jews and Gentiles, he's saying everybody. He's lumped into there all the people who live on the face of the earth, because that's how they talked back then. And what I want us to understand is that we're all in the same place. Every single person in this building this morning, and every single person listening at a distance this morning, we are all in the same place. We are all guilty of sin. And I don't care what you call your sin. You may have one word like murder and you have another word like slander. I don't care what it is. It's the same thing. It's sin. And Paul begins to quote many Old Testament scriptures, not just one place. These are taken from different places in the Old Testament. And he says, as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There's no one who does good, not even one. Their throats are open graves. Their tongues practice deceit. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness, and their feet are swift to shed blood, and ruin and misery marks their way. The way of peace they don't know. There's no fear of God before their eyes. Still sounds like I'm in the same spot, doesn't it? But he's getting us ready for the news of the ultimate gift. And all we have to do is be in a position to hear this news, and that position is that we recognize that we are all in the same place. I'm in that place, and you're in that place, and the whole world is in that place. And that place is that we have no righteousness in and of ourselves. We are all sinners. That's why I think that last week God is so strong in speaking about how ridiculous it is that we would judge other people harshly and with ugliness, thinking that we have arrived and we have the answers, because we are all in the same place. And I remind you of one other thing. And again, you're thinking, he's not telling me the truth. This is all the same stuff of the last 2 weeks. But the other thing is, being in this place ignites the wrath of God. That's our future, the wrath of God. But now the good news, now the ultimate gift, now the things that change. Because he begins in verse 21 and he says, but now apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which all the law and the prophets did testify. The righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There's no difference between Jew and Gentile. We're all in the same boat. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And all are justified freely by His grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ. It's kind of interesting to me that here we are, less than 2 weeks before Christmas, and we're studying through the book of Romans, and we arrive at a lesson like this. Because in our world today, there are people who use this time of Christmas not just to look at family and not just to look at people who need help, but they consider the love of Jesus Christ and how He came to this earth. And I'm really glad for that. And I hope this year that more people than ever before will consider Jesus as we celebrate this Christmas. It's kind of interesting that our lesson coincides with that today. Have you ever thought about how God thought about what we were experiencing today? In the beginning, we always use that phrase, but it's our beginning. It's not God's beginning. God's always been, and God always will be. But somewhere along the way, God decided, and it's God the Father, and it's God the Son, and it's God the Spirit, the three, decided that they would put together out of nothing what we know as this expansive, magnificent universe. And out of this universe, God decided to put one little tiny planet. Looking at the entire universe, it's almost indistinguishable. A little tiny planet wherein He designed it so it could sustain life. And yes, it was God the Father and God the Son and God the Spirit that created all the living creatures, but the last of His creation was the most special. And do you know that He literally reached down into the dirt that He had formed out of nothing, and He made it into a person? And He made that man, it says, in His own image. I don't completely understand that, but I know it's special. I know it's special. And God made man so that man would adore Him and appreciate Him and live with Him. But the interesting thing is, if you kind of read the Scriptures, you kind of get this idea that before He even made man and made this earth, and He knew it wouldn't work out the way He wanted it to. He knew that man would sin, and man did. And when man sinned, it separated him from God, because God is so holy, or God is righteous in our terms, and He cannot, by His nature, identify with, connect with, touch, be in fellowship with sin. In fact, His reaction to sin is wrath, great anger. And man's sin and all that God had planned was kind of messed up. And then God missed the fellowship, but He also looked at what was happening to all of us because of sin. And what is happening to all of us because of sin is just as ugly as the sin itself. Because we do have the broken relationships, and we do have the health problems that came because of the original sin. And we do have things that are just very, very unpleasant. That's why our announcements are so long, but those announcements, I mean, we announced a Christmas party that starts at 6 and ends at 6:20. Sue's a social one in our house, okay? That is a joke, okay? It's going to last at least 6:25, but that was a joke. But God looked and saw us all messed up. He didn't like that either. So somewhere before the beginning of time, beginning of our time, God must have sat down and had a talk. God the Father and God the Son and God the Spirit. How are we going to take care of the problem that we're creating? What are we going to do? Are we just going to let them go through life like that? And are we going to let them walk into destruction? And we have no choice but to ignite our wrath against all of it? What are we going to do? And I don't know how it happened, nor does anyone else. I can almost wishfully picture Jesus speaking to the Father and saying, what if I go? What if I go? And what if I go in such a way that I enter their world like they enter their world? That I be born into that world of a woman. And what if I live among them to show them what we really want them to live like? Interesting concept, isn't it? What if I walk among them to show them what it means to be kind, and show them what it means to be a person of love, and show them how to do life? And what if I allow myself to be killed? Would Would it work that my blood being shed would cover the sins of all the people? I don't know if there's a conversation like that, but if there was agreement. There was agreement that God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit said, yes, that would work. And it would stop our wrath against mankind. It would stop it. And so now Paul says that is exactly what happened. Now, what have we concluded? We concluded every single one of us is we're in a mess. The problem with that statement is the world doesn't recognize the mess. And the problem with that statement is we don't seem to recognize the mess so much. But we're all in a mess. And yet God comes forth and says, you don't have to be. I'm righteous. And I freely, did you catch that word freely in that passage? I freely, by my graciousness, I freely give you my righteousness by faith in my Son, Jesus Christ. Now that word faith is a big word. I have no intention of trying to cover that word this morning. But I will tell you this much. Paul's going to spend the entire 4th chapter of the book of Romans trying to describe faith so that you and I can understand it. And if you write down the equation that faith equals belief, it will not be an accurate equation. In fact, to get more accurate, you would say faith equals trust. That doesn't altogether do it. But trust is this deep belief, this deep conviction that I will stay with you no matter what, that I will obey you no matter what. All that's going to be borne out in future lessons. But by this kind of faith, by this kind of conviction that God is real, that Jesus is real, this story is true, I cover you with my righteousness. Now, what that means is I give you a passport. I give you some kind of credential so that you will never, ever experience any kind of wrath from me. Do you hear that? Do you comprehend that? I am giving you my righteousness so that you will never, ever experience my wrath. We'll have some of the consequences of sin still. And we'll feel the consequences of sin that other people commit. And we'll still get old. And we'll still have all the things that fall apart and need fixing, and some things can't get fixed. We'll all go through that kind of thing. But when this life is over, no wrath from God. Only well done statements. Only come statements. Enter the joy of the Lord statements. Does that excite you? We're talking about the finest, most wonderful thing that could ever happen. I'll tell you what really gives me pause is somehow the world's not hearing what I'm saying this morning. And somehow people aren't listening. Wouldn't you take the ultimate gift? You would take a big quantity of money 13 days from now, would you not? You would take a new house if I offered it to you, would you not? You would take all these other kind of, what about this gift? How I wish that the world could understand how easy it is to access the kingdom of God. I had a person ask me last week, do you ever talk about the kingdom? Do you ever use the word kingdom? I said, I try to use the word kingdom all the time. I try to talk about kingdom people. I try to talk about entry into the kingdom. In fact, I said I don't use the word church very often because the word church means a collection of people. It means people who've been called out. But the kingdom is the place where God reigns. The kingdom is the place where Jesus reigns. And we have to become part of the kingdom. And I will tell you, it just means a commitment that I'll begin to change my life. And we've talked about it so many times. You already know that the changing of one's life is a lifelong process. And sometimes I get tired of that. I just want to quit. Take me as I am. It's good enough. That's my favorite statement. It's good enough. It's not good enough. I just keep trying to change to be like Jesus. It's called faithfulness. And you are immersed into the kingdom. You are born again into the kingdom where God reigns. Isn't that interesting? That somehow in the mind of God, He said, you know, my son was born into your world. I want you to be born into my world. Isn't that interesting how He did that? And it's that simple. It's that simple to receive the ultimate gift of God's righteousness and to walk in this life knowing that He's on my side, He's working for my good, His Spirit lives inside of me. I will face whatever I face with Him on my side. And I'll go to my end on this earth unless Jesus comes before. I'll go to my end on this earth knowing that no wrath. Just beautiful words of come. Isn't that something? Now, why? Why wouldn't people take hold of the ultimate gift? We're going to pause and take our Lord's Supper. Would you intentionally think just for a moment that we're all in the same place with sin, but that Jesus came so that we didn't have to stay in that place. And He left heaven and He died a horrible death that we could have this gift. He did it for us. He didn't do it for Him. He did it for us.